Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very, very special edition of Mob Talk. This is episode 4. It is quickly becoming a very hot item here on our YouTube channel. Daniel, who would have thought? Who'd have thunk it that the mob would garner attention in more ways than we know? Oh my God, it's been a busy week. Dan, how you doing, my friend? The happy haberdasher, the smartest man in the room, Dan the Man Sebastiano. His street name is, they call him Mutton Chop Sebastiano. We're going to talk a lot about these. Got some names to share with both of you guys tonight.
Uh-oh.
So, Danny, how you doing, pal?
I can't complain. You know, any talk like this, always a fun topic, and any chance I get to drop another nickname.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I'm telling you what, it's been a busy week, Dan. I sent you some stuff to look at. We have a returning guest. Nick Christophers is joining us again. He is, and I have to say, Nick, your first appearance garnered a lot of attention. People loved that interview. Everybody thought, it's funny, and without even saying anything, everybody thought that you were some kind of either informant or a guy on the lam because you came across in silhouette. Danny, am I lying?
No, it had that hidden identity look.
It surely did. It honestly, and it was completely serendipitous. So,
good.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, right. Dan.
Yes, sir.
I am going to let you, my friend, do the honors tonight. Why don't you introduce Nick?
All right. Well, tonight's guest, Nick Christophers, is an author for the past 25 years. Nick Christophers has immersed himself in the field of mafia and mob-related writing and authorship, cranking out one bestseller after another. This includes Destinies II, No Honor Among Thieves, Prison Rules, the John Elite Story, Mafia Ties, the Greek Syndicate, and he did a stint as editor of Mob Candy magazine. Nick Christophers has also received a Literary Achievement Award for exceptional reporting from Radio Aktina FM, which is the leader in Greek internet radio. He was recently featured on the Reelz TV documentary Mafia Killers with Colin McLaren, and that is how we came to discover him, how you came to discover him. Nick Christophers, the exceptional author, is our guest today.
Absolutely. Nick, I want to tell you something. You talk about serendipity. Brother, we could not have planned this episode any better. Who'd have thought that just a few weeks back when we spoke last, that we would actually have very topical matters to talk about? It's been, I'm sure you know, you and I spoke earlier. It's been a very, very busy week. If the country has been living under a rock for the last 4 or 5 days, Philadelphia is all the buzz with the mafiosa again are rearing their ugly heads. 15 purported mobsters have all been either arrested, charged, or indicted on drugs, racketeering, and extortion, and that's just the top of the list. It's a candy list of crimes ranging from racketeering to murder to extortion to bribery, bribing federal judges, you name it, it's there. And these prosecutors, the Philadelphia prosecutors, little did they realize that the mob was still alive and well in Philadelphia. As one person said, rumors of the mob's demise have been greatly exaggerated. So, Nick, you're familiar with some of these players. I sent you some stuff, Dan, so yes, you have a little bit of knowledge now. So let's fill everybody in on some of these. And this is Dan's favorite part of the show, the names. Here's some of the names, and I love this. Oh, we always have fun. Dominic, the Big One Grande. Joseph Joey Electric Servito. Salvatore Sonny Mazzone. Joseph Bacala Malone. Louis Sheep Beretta. Victor Big Vic DeLuca. Kenneth Arabia. Daniel Kazi Castelli. Carl Chianese. Anthony Tony Meatballs Giafoli. John Romeo. Daniel Danny Boy Malatesta. Daniel Baccheroni, and John Michael Payne. That is about as American as you want to get on this who's who. All 15 defendants are due to appear in front of a U.S. District Court in Philadelphia, according to documents filed. That will be on January the 8th. One of those individuals actually had a heart attack when served with the papers at his front door. So needless to say that, I mean, I believe that was, if you remember who that was, Nick, did they say who had the heart attack?
I forgot which guy it was. I think it was not Meatballs. It was the other guy, the older gentleman, Castelli. I think I'm not sure which one.
Yeah,
one of the old guys. There's like 71 guys.
Yeah, Daniel Cosby.
I think it was.
Yep, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. So upon hearing of this, because Dan is a little too young to remember, but us older, our age is getting us away. We remember a time in Philadelphia / New York mob lore when this thing happened before, Nick, and it was right at the time when Angelo Bruno was killed, and all hell broke loose. And just like this, the mob indictments came down. Guys were taken into custody. Some flip-flopped on others. Others kept their mouths shut and did time, like stand-up guys. And a lot of them went into witness protection, never to be heard from again. Where do we stand with this? Give me you have been around these guys a long time, Nick. Give me your educated opinion on this. Where do we go from here? What's going to happen next?
Well, first we got to find out how it lays out to begin with, to see what sticks, what actually sticks. They got an underboss in the mix, Mazzone.
Yeah.
Who's there? Steve.
Yeah.
Was pinched. That's going to play out. We'll see what happens because they did shades of, as a matter of fact. So we got to see how this is gonna out, who goes where, how long, and who flips.
Yeah,
this is a waiting game right now.
Exactly.
I think the guy we got to worry about. I think the guy we got to worry about is the youngest kid, Payne.
Yeah,
he's like 34 years old. He's young.
Yeah.
So I think we got to look. Yeah.
So now,
because Payne is young, he's not going to want to sit there.
You've been following us a little bit. I gave you some educational materials to enlighten you and inform you.
Yeah, this
so
was
what's your take on it?
Well, I think this is not just the Philly Inquirer, but NBC, CNN, a lot of the major networks have covered it. I think the two things that most jumped out at me, and we talked about this on the last show, is how recently people have been recruited. They were saying they were bringing in new made men as early as 2015, or as recently as 2015, which goes against the narrative that they'd stopped recruiting 20 years ago. But the other thing that came out was their reach, because obviously you talk about Philadelphia, everybody knows the Philly and that region, but they're talking about business dealings as far north as the opposite end of the Jersey Shore, which apparently has indicated that they were surprised that they still had reach out that far. So I think
that is a great segue, Dan, because I want to go right there with Nick. Now, Nick, none of these guys do anything without the okay or the approval of one of the 5 families in New York. So we just need to be, we have to be, if we're to be true and honest, the New York runs the world in that regard. So, and every one of these guys, every one of these 15 guys represents at least one person, at least one member of those 5 families, and several of these guys are affiliated, with a couple of different families here. So let's talk about how New York is looking at this. Give me a kind of like a bird's eye view of of what the higher ups, let's call them, for lack of a better term, the Godfathers, the commission, if you will. They look at something like this, and what is where does their head go?
Well, I mean, the commission really doesn't function right. It hasn't functioned in years, because it's what happened back in '92 with Gotti. So there is no real. They haven't had any commission meetings ever. Those are done. Right. That's not going to happen again. But you're right that Philly can't really blink without New York knowing about it. That's a fact. It'd be the Genovese or the Gambino family that really overlooks, because you could go way back to the time of Nicky Scarfa. Nicky Scarfa was well connected with John Gotti.
Absolutely.
So that there's like a Gambino connection. Jersey, Genovese's. So there's the connection, Philly and Jersey with the Genovese crew.
Yeah.
And Grandy, those two guys, they're a family tree. Goes a lot of their own family members are made people that have had connections with the New York brand. So that's where that connection comes from.
Now, Nick, is this something to worry about? I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, in your opinion, this they took 15 guys in, and they apparently, according to the information we're getting, this is the culmination of at least a 4-year probe. That they're telling us at least 4 years. Given that, talking about 4 years that's a lot of time to go unnoticed or to go under the radar. How did the feds pull this off for 4 years without any inkling of it?
Snitch. There was somebody on the inside. Definitely. Okay. That's why the whole thing happened, because where they had one guy selling fake drugs to take him out.
Yeah. Well, that's we know that.
So that guy is.
Yeah, and we actually were told yesterday that they found out who the snitch is. His name has not yet been released, but they know who it is, and they're telling. The word is that they're telling people nobody's safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they're saying.
They've got to act on it.
So this is the tip of the iceberg, Dan.
Yes, sir.
15 guys on top. So you're the smartest guy in the room. Give me your hypothesis here. Oh, I used the big word, hypothesis.
Well, we've touched on before in some of the previous, in some of the previous mob talks we've had, that there's really no net that'll catch everything. I mean, they're saying they brought people in as early as as recently as 2015. They're talking about they've got somebody on the inside. They're looking at this big group. You don't charge 15 big names at the same time without a big case you've been building for a long time, which means odds are there's more charges coming to, if not some of these guys getting hit with more, somebody else has got to be looking over their shoulder now thinking, shit, what do they have on me? Which I think is going to be the next big story is who's next, because
and that's exactly right. And that's why I said, when I was addressing the issue with Nick earlier, this is the tip of the iceberg. These are 15 made guys. These are like, the creme de la creme of the made guys, or what's left of them anyway. And, I mean, that's the thing, Nick. They're a dwindling breed, but But you got these old holdouts, you know.
Well, I think that the biggest fear right now for anybody who's on the street, if you notice, the guys that they picked up are the old guard, guys in the 80s, 70s, late 60s. So these guys, you take these guys off. You got young Turks running around, which don't care in structure, and you got a problem there. So I don't know what to expect at this point, because there'll be a lot of shifting going on.
Well, Nick, let me ask you a question. Would your best guess be that the snitch was probably a younger dude?
Yeah, I would think so. He was trying to get in, trying to get his feet wet.
And so what is the benefit
of that, or somebody that already?
Yeah, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What do you say?
No, I was going to say, what would be the benefit for a young guy if he's just wanting to get his feet wet and be a part of this thing? You know, what's the benefit to him to snitch guys out? What's the MO?
Well, it's either there's only two. It could be two things. Either it's a young guy and maybe he got picked up on something. The feds put dangling in his face and say, "Listen, we can get you on this unless you do this." Or this guy that's already is concerned about his own wealth. Okay, maybe I can. Maybe he was on the on the outs with somebody.
Yeah.
With Mazzone or with Grandy or one of the guys.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I think it goes to something we talked about in the last episode is you've got a couple of younger guys. I mean, obviously, John Michael Payne's 34. He's the only one in the group younger than me, but we talked about the internet and expansion and stuff like that. I think it's telling that a group so centered in an old family is willing to bring in guys born when some of this stuff started, because they probably needed somebody to use the computers, to use the phones in a way that some of these guys in their 70s could never do.
Dan, thank you for saying that, brother, because that ties into what we spoke about on the first episode of Mob Talk, the recruiting tools, 21st century recruiting.
Right.
That the mob is using. The internet. That's the biggest weapon they have right now is the internet. They can do all their business, basically in shadow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at what we're doing right now. You don't have to coordinate anymore. You could have guys in 10 different cities have a meeting that's virtually untraceable. And you don't have to have everybody in the same room anymore or on the same tappable phone calls.
Yeah. He's got a point, Nick. What do you think?
No, it's possible. I can't confirm that. Possible. But I understand from people I've spoken to, is in Philly especially, they were recruiting guys from Sicily. Because their talent pool was, lack of a better term, their talent pool was not there, and they needed to replenish the ranks. So sometimes when that happens, they reach out to Sicily, and they bring guys in. They bring the zips, as they call them.
Yeah, and you know what, Nick, and we actually addressed that on a previous episode during the 80s. The Gambino family recruited heavily from Sicily. In fact, Rosario Gambino and his cousin, they opened up a Valentino's nightclub in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, as a front for their operation. And not all of, but a lot of Philadelphia money went through that club. We know now because the club is closed and most of them have been arrested, and those that are, that are still alive or long gone. Those that did survive aren't talking. Unfortunately, a lot of people were left in the wake of bullets and blood during that time. Dan, you remember we talked to we talked at length about the war that Angelo Bruno's assassination caused,
right?
And how the rise of Nicky Scarfo, God help us all, the rise of Nicky Scarfo pretty much brought Philadelphia to his knees.
Yes, that's true.
So you know what, Nick, you know a lot about that. So why don't you elaborate on that? Give everybody a history lesson.
Well, what do you call Angelo Bruno, who was called the Docile Don, who for like 30 years peacefully, he was a very good mediator of violence. That's why they called him Docile Don. And Capo Negro wanted Angelo out to New York and asked permission to take out Bruno, which he did. The Genovese said, "Okay, go ahead. The Chins, go ahead. What you got to do?" No, Anthony not realizing that he was going to get double banked, so he got double crossed and he got backed also after he killed Bruno. And like you said, Angelo came. I mean, who came in after Angelo was our good boy Nicky Scarfo, and Nicky Scarfo totally decimated Philadelphia as we know it, because everybody he was very paranoid. And God knows how many guys he took out just from looking the wrong way, So the structure of Philly when Nicky came into power just was, I can go down the line. Philly Testa, we can go on and on. How many guys? It just never was a.
Oh yeah, well, you know what, Nick? It was Phil Testa, his nephew, Phil Testa's son, Sal Testa, who was Nicky Scarfo's nephew. They found him actually not far from where I am right now in New Jersey. Here's a guy, and Dan, we talked about it before. It's funny. 42 people in his crew, and 26 of them he had whacked.
Yeah.
That's paranoid, brother. That's a strange.
Yep.
He was a strange dude.
I mean, when you start getting into killing more than half your friends, you're past the point of cleaning house.
Oh yeah, I mean, Nick will tell you
pretty much.
Nicky Scarfo was arguably the most purported godfather, Mafia Don, whatever you want to call him, and I don't know a lot of people who ever referred to him as the Godfather, but they did call Angelo Bruno Godfather.
Well, that makes sense. The only other guy that's close to what Scarfo did, well, kind of close, but is Anthony Gaspar Picasso here in New York. Very similar mentality.
And we actually talked about him a little, Nick. You're a guy who knew him a little bit.
Well, I know his son.
Yeah, and he was a guy that, again, arguably one of the more paranoid, mafia associates you'll ever read about or ever hear about. He would just as soon kill you than look at you. He was just a strange kind of guy.
Yes,
you've been around a lot of these kind of guys. No, I was just going to say, you've been around a lot of these kind of guys. What's the mindset, Nick? What's the mindset? What makes a guy like, if we had to call him the perfect mobster, the perfect gangster? What are the qualifications to be like the perfect misfit for that kind of crew?
You mean in a good way or a bad way?
Well, and it depends on what you mean by good or bad. I think good for them. I
think the all-time gangster that I think that I knew briefly. I met once or twice. I went to his funeral. Was John Sonny Francis. To me, that guy was hardcore. Didn't get any more than him. The man died. So lived a gangster, died one. Never ratted on nobody. Took his time on it. Never made a complaint.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts on Michael Francis?
No comment.
Thank you, because I've asked that question to, and I'll tell you, I have asked that exact question to no less than 4 mob authors. Every one of them said the same thing. But then off the record, I had one who actually said to me, I think he's still connected. I think he's still working, and I think he's still making a shit ton of money. And I believe every bit of that.
I don't know about that one. I just think he's a great manipulator. That's what he is. He's a phenomenal manipulator. He's I don't believe half the things he said.
Well, and therein lies. Yeah, and that, Nick, therein lies the gist of his credibility. Dan, you want to pick up on the Michael Francis thing?
You know, it's funny. There is, for lack of a better term, there's very little to say, because Nick Christopher's answer is the generic comment, like, you know, we'll take the narrative. I've got no further comment on explanation. I think it creates a neat discussion, because there are people out there that think, like Angelo, you said, that he's still connected, that he might still be running things from behind the scenes, but you're not going to find anybody that really wants to do a deep dive talk on that.
Well, and you know, the same thing could be said for Joey Merlino, Skinny Joey. There are people who swear and be damned to this day that he's still running Philadelphia from Florida.
Oh no, that he is. That I believe.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, Nick. If you think about it, isn't that the most optimum way to do business from afar?
Well, I mean, look at the guys that got picked up today. Mazzone, Grand. All these guys were tight with Skinny. Especially Mazzone. Mazzone and Lingambi, John Lingambi, and Merlino used to run a softball rec while they were in prison. They ran a rec softball team together called Gino's Cafe. That tells you how tight these guys were.
Yeah.
So I would. Merlino's not being a good boy home playing with his dog. You know, he's definitely doing something. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, he's not home playing with his dog. I can guarantee you that. Daniel, you have one of the foremost mob authors in the country. Go ahead and ask away, my friend. Ask away.
Well, I mean, we've got a hell of a topic in front of us with these gentlemen being arrested. I'm curious, and we talked about it last time with the accuracy of Hollywood's portrayal, Hollywood's portrayal of the mafia. 2 of the movies that often come up as being the most accurate when it comes to mob is Donnie Brasco and Goodfellas. Well, if this, it's not universal. I'm just saying that tends to be the ones that come up. I'm curious if this turns out this story broke because of an inside man. How soon before we see the Philly mob movie, the Philly mob story? Because usually the mob story, Whitey Bulger, the mob stories Hollywood loves going at involve snitches.
Daniel, the prosecutors are working on the script as we speak.
There you go.
Probably.
Well,
and actually, it's funny Dan says that. It's funny you say that, because there's never really been a flick about Philly Crew. Not that I know of.
That's true.
That's a fair point.
You're absolutely right, Nick. That's factual. It's true.
Well, let me ask you something. Philly, Jersey, that region has been one of the hotbeds for organized crime since the beginning. But every time you see you see talk of the mob, people talk about Chicago, they talk about New York, what is it about that Philly, Jersey region that kind of flies under the radar despite its rampant activity?
I can answer.
Oh, you want to answer that?
No, I'm going to let you answer it first, Nick, and then I'm going to give you the Italian answer.
Well, if you remember, Angelo, the New York guys, if you remember watching this is a good example of Sopranos. I know it's fiction, but if you remember the Sopranos, they had no respect for the New Jersey guys. And it's true. They never looked like New Jersey was at the
Yep.
They never respected them. They never had a bunch of hillbillies. But they didn't realize that the New Jersey crew were pretty crazy. They were, something you just brush away. So I think the Sopranos gave us the best viewpoint of how New Jersey was tougher than the New York guys even thought. Same goes for Philly. Same idea. They just never got the respect.
Here's my take on that. I have mixed feelings on the whole accuracy of the Sopranos, and for that matter, Donnie Brasco or Goodfellas or The Godfather or any of those. I've got pretty differing views on that sort of pop culture image of the mob. But I will say this. Whenever they wanted dirty work done in Philly, they came to Jersey to look for somebody to do it. So that ties into what Nick, that ties into what Nick Christophers is getting at. They would always find somebody here to take the money, to keep their mouth shut, and never say a word. And there were plenty of guys back in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s that would do that. Who had no conscience, who didn't care, who had nothing else going for them other than this one-off payday. Sometimes they were able to parlay it into something beneficial, but most of the time, you never saw these guys again. But why Philadelphia and New Jersey flew underneath the radar for so long is one word, Dan: community. They're very, very tight. It's kind of like, if the cops are asking around and they want to know this and they want to know that, I didn't see nothing, I didn't hear nothing, I don't know nothing. Yeah. They all kept it. It was called the Code of Omerta. They all kept quiet. So, and now, Nick, what do you think? As my assessment,
I'm going to add.
Is my assessment accurate?
Well, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's pretty cute. But I'll tell you.
Thank you.
What I really think. Somewhat you're somewhat correct, because Code of Omerta was pretty general for everybody. But the difference between Philly and New York, in New York, you have too much drama. You have 5 families. So one is trying to outdo the other or whatever. There's a lot of drama going on. In Jersey, you only have one mob family, the Cavalcanti. That's it. Yeah. In Philly, you only had the Philly crew. That's it. There wasn't a lot of like one the other family. Nothing going on. So that's right where they were very tight because they only had one themselves. Not saying the other. When you talk about getting guys from Jersey to to whack somebody out, for example, a good example would be when they tried to kill John Gotti. Who'd they go to? They went to Jersey to get Bobby Manna. Bobby Manna was a Jersey guy to take out John. It never happened, of course.
Right, sure.
But that's who they reached out to. Nobody in New York. They reached out to a guy in Jersey. So that what you were saying before kind of ties in.
Yeah. Dan, let's
Yes, sir.
you and I have had on previous episodes the conversations about the influence and power structure of the New York mob.
Yes, sir.
Have that conversation with Nick. I'm curious to hear your take on this, Nick. I want you and Dan to have that conversation. I want to stay out of this one for a minute because Dan already knows how I feel about it. And as usual, I'm probably wrong because Dan's the smartest guy in the room, and he'll tell you because I'm contractually obligated to tell him he's the smartest guy in the room. But no, go ahead, Dan. You and Nick have that power structure.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's actually a great segue because Nick, you mentioned the Jersey and Philly only having the one family. Something in New York it's very. We talked about this before. Is that it's almost regional. There are several groups that exist simultaneously, and you have to kind of have like Angelo said, you have a power structure but you also have to have kind of a different pyramids of sorts where you don't have just one guy in charge of one guy, because you have to have more liaisons, you have to have more foot soldiers, you have to have more people on the side. And I'm wondering if such an organization, especially we touched on Angelo before with New York being one of the first groups, some of the New York families to reach out to non-mob organizations, working with local black gangs, working with local Irish gangs.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at, Daniel. Go ahead, go.
And I was wondering, Nick, if you had a thought on that, because that's something that, other than what Angelo touched on, is maybe going across the river to Jersey to get some dirty hands. You'd never hear of the Philly family letting the Bloods smuggle in something they were buying, or having a local Irish gang escort a shipment. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, as far as the fact that certain organizations have been more successful because they've been willing to branch out.
Well, it's interesting you bring it up, Dan, because this wasn't. If you remember back in the early 80s. Yeah, early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Paul Castellano used to hire a crew of Irish guys called the Westies, which was Jimmy Coonan, Mickey Feathers, all those guys in that area. Eddie Maloney, all them. He used to get those guys to do some of his dirty work. And he used to hire them to do things. So that's getting guys from the outside is really new. They don't do it very often. But it's nothing new. But what's happening now that you mentioned about the blacks, the Bloods, the Cribs, or Kings, whoever they're using, that is a bad sign, because that shows that the talent pool is leaking. There is no talent pool. In other words, they don't got real shooters anymore. They don't have guys that are going to go out and they got to go to reach out to black gangsters to go do their dirty work, which doesn't look very good. That makes them look pretty bad, actually. So in other words, they're missing. They don't have those tough guys anymore that are going to go out and walk up to some guy and just shoot him in a restaurant. Those days are kind of like going to the.
About bringing in the Bloods and the Latin Kings and those groups.
Right.
He said the Bloods and the Crips.
So you guys didn't hear that part.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said the Bloods and the Kings. You said the Bloods and the Crips. My mistake.
The Crips, yeah.
No, I didn't mention. I did say that. So you missed that whole part.
Well, that's right when your sound cut out.
You missed that.
Yeah, it cut out right after you said Bloods and Crips.
Oh no. Okay. All right. Well, I'll backtrack. Did I talk? Did you guys hear the part where I talked about the Irish that Paul Castellano used to use?
Yeah, the Irish crew, the Westies. Yeah.
Did you get that part?
You got all that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, what I was trying to say, what I said earlier, was the moment the mob guys start to hire black gang kings or anybody like that to do their dirty work, there's something wrong. That means you would think that trying to distance themselves from implicated, which is total bullshit.
Yeah.
You back out a wise guy. Why would the gang? So it's obviously going to be them. So the reason why this is happening is because there's lack of tough guys. The talent pool's not there.
Know what?
Nobody's
Nick,
willing to go.
Let me tie into that, Nick, because we had an interesting conversation, Dan and I, the last I think episode 2 of Mob Talk. We had a really interesting conversation about how social media and television and movies are being used. And Dan, tell me if I'm full of shit here, because this is the truth, Nick. You're going to shit yourself when I tell you. They're using social media, television, and the movies to recruit mob guys. And I can't even make this shit up. Go ahead, Dan.
No, you're absolutely right. Several stories that have come out in the last 10, 15 years or so have covered the rise of social media with Twitter feeds and Facebook groups, as well as distribution of movies like Goodfellas and The Godfather, saying, hey, kids, kids being a relative term, guys in their 30s, this is what the mob's like. And you get guys that kind of offer themselves up or seek out different organized crime groups because they watch it. They watch The Sopranos and they think that's cool. I want to be part of that.
Tell Nick, and Nick, I want Dan to tell you, because if it comes from me, you're going to think it's bullshit. But Dan's got a trustworthy face, so and I'm not even Dan. You got to tell Nick about how these people think that The Sopranos was a recruiting tool for the Jersey, Philadelphia, New York mob. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Angela's absolutely right. That's come up before, where especially as its popularity raised and you started seeing books and video game spinoffs and things like that, there was a narrative that the focus of The Sopranos was being targeted towards younger guys under the age of 40. Hey, look at how cool, how fun, how great being an organized crime guy is. And these kids, and again, I use that term loosely, were watching shows like The Sopranos and seeking out guys they knew from the local bars and the areas like that may have had a tie or two, offering themselves up. Hey, what do you need me to do? How do I get in? I saw this show. I saw this movie that I want in. And people are joining, thinking, let's do it. Let's be the Goodfellas. Let's be the Sopranos. Whether that's true or not, that was very successful.
Can't make this shit up, Nick.
No, I can't make it up. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it may be possible. I didn't hear anything like that, but I didn't want to join because I've been there already. I saw what it's like and was not interested. But it's possible some guys might have, but no, I guess it's still hasn't been there since the early 90s.
Right.
That's why they started bringing guys in. Then, for example, the Camorra, the Negreta, these other organizations are actually a lot bigger and a lot more international than the traditional mob,
right?
Just like we're talking about the Cosa Nostra.
It's
those organizations are a lot bigger.
Say that. It's really interesting you say that, and I'll let you continue in a second. But I'm reminded, as you're talking about the international level, let's talk about Japan for a second. They have, believe it or not, the mafia, for the lack of a better word. In Japan, they call it the Yakuza. They are respected. They're not feared. They're respected. And the Yakuza is part of their culture.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine something like that here?
No. That's scary.
You know why? Because it might actually work.
Well, yeah, possibly. I mean, the Yakuza are a very powerful organization that's been around for centuries.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like the mob. they basically derived their tradition. Right. So that's how that whole thing kind of created. Crazy guy, bunch of guys, very powerful, but they seem to be more powerful in their own surroundings, so to speak. Same thing with the Chinese triads, which
sure.
They tried to get the foothold here in America. They're powerful, but not nowhere near the level of the traditional. Nobody's going to be near the traditional mob in America. Nobody, not one organization, because the traditional mob was so good at controlling politics that no other group could do that.
Yeah, Nick, let's ask you a question about, and this is kind of a bizarre question, but you know, as bizarre as it may sound, I'm sure that you have a plausible answer for it. Have you known of, or has there ever been a recorded event of a guy being indoctrinated into the mob and deciding he no longer wants that lifestyle and been able to just walk away? Has it ever happened that you know of?
No. Would that happen? There's one guy. It's funny. There's one guy. Funny you say that. His name was not the Joe Bernard. Be the same, but his name is Joe. Right? And going back, I think maybe the late '80s. I think, and he decided to flip. And to flip, not because he had an indictment or anything. He just did. He did exactly what you said, Angelo. You know what? I don't want to be part of this anymore. And he flipped, and he became an FBI informant. He wasn't even in life very long.
Well, it scares me.
But similar to what you said.
Yeah, well, it scares me how, you know, you think, and because I knew you had an answer for it. See, I knew of that story. I knew of that story very well, in fact. And I knew the end result of it. Which is proof positive that Nick Christophers knows his shit, by God. So, Daniel.
Yes, sir.
While you're laughing underneath your mutton chops, why don't you go ahead and talk to Nick about your favorite subject, the mob and the movies. Let's talk about the accuracy of some of these films we watch.
Well, if I may start with that, Nick, when I was mentioning earlier, I talked recruitment. I said one of the films that has been brought up on our show before from other authors that is often revered as being accurate is Donnie Brasco. You laughed and kind of shook your head, and I was wondering what it is about that. What's your opinion on the fact that you don't consider that accurate? I've always heard the opposite.
Well, I mean, accurate. You mean accurate in how the life is, or accurate in what actually happened?
Well, actually, a combination of both, but more accurate in its portrayal of the actual mob.
Oh, okay. No, yes, that I would agree. Donnie Brasco is pretty much on point of what it's like, how crazy it is, how lethal it is, how treacherous it is. Yes, I would agree with that. What historic? Completely wrong from the beginning to the end, almost.
Really?
Yeah, accurate. The life it really is like, but the way it is, what actually did happen, and what was shown on the screen is not the same.
You know, it's funny.
And I can tell you what happened.
Well, it's funny you describe it that way, because that's often one of the, for lack of a better word, criticisms leveled at the movie Goodfellas, is that it's a phenomenal portrayal of what the mob is really like, but the story itself is entirely fictional.
Correct. That's also true. So, same goes for Casino.
Casino was horrible. Can we just call a spade, okay? Casino was fucking god-awful. It was horrible. That was no more accurate than Dan the Man being the smartest man.
Hey now.
Yeah,
Well,
but it was not. It was. You know what it was? It was a fairy tale. It wasn't a mob movie. It was. It was a great crime thriller, but it wasn't a mafia movie. I could tell you that. Because that's just not how things are done. It's just. I'm sorry, but it's not. That's not how things are done. The characters were over the top. The storyline and plot was over the top. They needed to bring it down. If they had brought it down a little bit to an even level, it might have reflected some accuracy. Because despite what people think, the mob is not all that dramatic, Nick, and you know that. It's actually, quite frankly, quite mundane. You know, once in a while you'll have a crew of 5 or 6 fat guys sitting around a round table, chomping on a cigar or two, talking about how to do business and what's next and blah blah blah. But that's rare. The suit and tie gangsters are gone. They're t-shirt and jeans now. And the real gangsters are carrying briefcases and fountain pens. But
I don't know about that, but okay.
Sorry to slow your roll, Daniel.
No, you're all right. I'm gonna partially disagree with you on Casino, though. If there's one thing, anytime you have a movie about the mafia that has Joe Pesci in it, it's automatically good. So just saying.
What the wine make you
Dan, to tell you something
humorous?
What's that, Nick?
Well, Dan, I love Joe Pesci too. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Joe Pesci fan. But Joe Pesci, action movie, he played Tony Spilotro pretty good. Because that's what he was like. He was a freaking off the wall, crazy, murderous prick. Forget about it. But when he played Tommy D in Goodfellas, first of all, Tommy D didn't look anything like him. Tommy D was not a good-looking guy. He had a mustache, and he was 6 foot tall. Joe Pesci's a midget. I mean, what a bad.
Yeah. Well, Nick, you know what? Let's talk about that a second, because my information that came directly from the source said that Joe Pesci's character in that film was directly based off of Nicky Scarfo.
For Goodfellas?
For Goodfellas. They said that the characterization, his personality, his behavior was all based off of Nicky Scarfo.
Well, I don't know. So what happened to Tommy D?
Well, no, I'm not disputing.
That was the case.
No, I'm not disputing that the character was based on Tommy D. That we know factually. But they're telling me that the personality, the character quirks,
okay.
the hot-temperedness, the short stature, that he was chosen for that role specifically because and even if you looked at the movie, he kind of favored Nicky Scarfo, because let's be honest about it, Scarfo was a midget, he was a little, but you could never call him little Nicky to his face, he'd kill you.
Yeah, well, Nicky had a what do we call a Napoleon complex.
Oh boy, did he!
First of all, yeah. You just something, and I freaking I wanted to say something, but you touched upon something. Okay, there's a movie that came out. I don't know if you guys know about it. And it was about Sal Polisi, who was with the Gambinos. And there was a place called the Sinatra Club that all guys from all different families used to go and hang out. Guys from the Gambino crew, okay, whatever. And in this movie, there's a guy who plays Tommy D. And I forgot the actor's name, but man, he played it to a T. You got to check out this movie because this one was pretty accurate. and it has a guy playing John Gotti, but a younger version of Gotti, beginning to do hijackings when he wasn't that big yet. And it was pretty good, actually.
Interesting stuff. Did you see Nick, did you see the Gotti film that John Travolta did?
Yeah, my dog did a better movie. Sucked.
Thank you. The only thing I can say is they had him looking pretty good, but that was it. They had him looking like Gotti, but that was it.
Yeah,
that's where
a little bit.
Yeah, well, they made sure that he had the right clothes. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
But yeah.
I mean, look, I respect Travolta. I like some of his work in the past. I know he tried hard. I know he was trying, but it just didn't.
I mean, you got to have a certain kind of, inner attitude to pull off a part like that. Like, you either have it or you don't. Dan.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about bad casting in good movies. Go ahead.
Oh, we could go further on that one.
Go
ahead, Daniel.
Well, I mean, me, like I mentioned, anything Joe Pesci's in, I think if you're talking bad casting in movies, especially if you're looking at the Mafia, you have to talk about Godfather 3 and just some of the very questionable choices.
You thank you. But Nick, Dan went exactly where I wanted him to go.
Yeah.
He went exactly where, because that's the quintessential film of bad acting, bad actors cast in a good movie.
And it's a shame because her career has developed something to become so well and respected. But Sofia Coppola's appearance in Godfather 3 is often considered one of the worst roles in film, not just Mafia history, film history.
In film history.
Yeah.
She's singularly one of the worst film actresses I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But I love her father.
But well, that was because her father was directing it, so she got the part. Let's be real. It's nepotism in a big way.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, Nick, I'll tell you what, brother. I gotta have you back for another episode. I like to bring Nick back every month if we could. We might do that. We might just.
I like talking with Dan.
Yeah, you know what? I'd like to bring Nick on and have him host MobTALk. That would be a great idea. We'll talk about it.
That'd be exciting.
That'd be exciting. So, look, I give you Dan to be there. I give you Dan the Man Sebastiano over here, allegedly the smartest guy in the room. He asked a good question. I smarten him up. I educate this kid. Look, I cultivated this little bastard. Look at him. Daniel.
Yes, sir.
We are up on the hour. It's been a fast show tonight, brother. Let's have a word from our sponsor, and we'll say goodnight to Nick.
All righty. Well, we talked a lot tonight with the mob and some of the jokes and the comments we made, and the something that comes up a lot with the mob is whacking and your boys. And with our sponsor, you can whack your own boys, and that's our sponsor is manscaped.com. I specifically use that word because their new product is the Weed Whacker, which is a phenomenal ear, nose hair trimmer. As an Italian, I need one of those to survive. Their prime package is the Lawnmower 3.0. Which is a wonderful shaver. It comes in a package including a deodorizer, a refreshing spray, some wipes. It comes in a nice leather bag, free shipping. You can use promo code WrestlingFuture at manscaped.com for 20% off. That is manscaped.com, promo code WrestlingFuture, manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you.
And so will we. And we will thank Nick Christophers for being with us yet again. Nick, I got to have you back, brother. You are just too damn good of a guest. You are really a great guest to have. We love having you here. And the subject matter, let's be honest about it. The subject matter is endless. You could go on and on with this kind of stuff. Holy shit. You know?
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just saying, forget about it. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, it's, but, here's a question. I'll give you one last parting question before we leave. Why are we enamored by these modern day Robin Hoods, these mob guys?
Because we all wish we were one.
Interesting. Yep. To the point, Dan the man.
Can't argue with that logic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are at the end of another one. Nick Christophers will be back. I guarantee it. If I got to go to New York and hog tie his ass, he'll be back.
Thank you.
And for Dan the man and for Nick Christophers, I am Angelo DeCipio. Thanks for joining us. Remember, we are always wrestling with the future. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody, and happy wrestling. Bye-bye.
Good night, guys.